Before we begin, a quick favor. If this podcast has been meaningful to you, would you consider leaving a review? It really does help others find this space and join us on their own healing journey. And if you haven't already, you can download your free IFS meditations at exploreifs.com. Welcome back to IFS Meditations and Insights. I'm Tim Fortescue, and I'm really glad you're here. Today's episode is a little different from our usual format. Most weeks we explore a concept from internal family systems or spend time together in meditation. But today, we're stepping into a conversation, one that I think many of you will find both fascinating and deeply human. I sure did, and that's why it was a longer episode. And in this episode, I'm joined by Skylar, Lyralen, Kaye, author of the memoir Bachelor X, and if you're watching this when it comes out in just a few days, the book will come out on April 1st. And Bachelor X is a bold, funny, and very honest book that explores identity, healing, trauma, relationships, and what it means to navigate life with a very vivid inner world. What makes this book especially unique is that the story is told through the voices of Skylar's inner people in different personalities and parts that live within their internal system. So as you read, you're not just hearing one narrator, you're witnessing an entire inner community interacting, maybe arguing a little, protecting, reflecting, and trying to figure out life together. In many ways, the book reads like a real-time conversation among parts, which is part of why it caught the attention of Dick Schwartz, the founder of Internal Family Systems. He described it as offering a courageous and uncensored window into how someone's internal family members interact and how trauma shapes those relationships. And that's exactly what we explore today. We talk about the inner world, trauma and protectors, dating and relationships, identity, healing, and what it looks like to approach our inner lives with curiosity rather than judgment. There are moments in this conversation that are funny, moments that are vulnerable, and moments that might stretch us a little. That's part of what makes it meaningful. So wherever you're listening from today, driving, walking, sitting quietly somewhere, I'm glad you're here. Let's step into the conversation. Well, Skylar, I'm really excited for this conversation and that you're here, and would just love, as we open up, just tell us a little more about you and the book, and then we can see where it goes from there.
Okay. So Skylar, Lyralen, Kaye, I use either they, fair, or they, them pronouns, and I'm a queer, social justice, plural, activist, writer, actor, performer, director, producer. I do all those things. I've also been a teacher for a lot of my life. I used to teach acting. I've taught yoga. I've taught ESL. And I'm right now in Europe, and last year I was in Scotland. I paddle boarded in 15 locks, and that was a life high. I also paddle boarded in Ireland, and they're very similar, the kind of Celtic culture, which I really love.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I know you talk a lot about, I told you I've read about a third of your book, and I'm going to read the rest. I'm not a huge reader, but this one, yeah, I'm probably going to figure out how to listen to it. Is it coming out on Audible or not? I know that's a whole other deal. So,
well, the book doesn't officially release till April 1st, but I am definitely going to recorded so that there's an audiobook available on April 1st. And I'm excited because I'm an actor and I'm going to get to play all the parts,
I love it.
which I love so much. It's so much fun. So,
Yeah.
that'll
Well,
be
tell
good.
us a little. So, Bachelor X, am I saying that right? Is
You
the
are.
title of the book. And we'll talk more, but tell us a little more about that and that book that's coming out April 1st.
Well, it it's a memoir, and I've been a screenwriter, a playwright. I've written novels. I've been a performance poet, and memoir. I think, at least for me, you write a memoir when you need to discover something about your life that you can't get to any other way.
Yeah.
I know that some people like record their memoirs to sort of let people in on their lives. Like later in life, they do that. But for me, it's in musical theater, when people burst into song, it's like the play and the story rises up, and song is the only way it can be expressed. That's how memoir feels to me. It's like something in my life rose up, and this was the only way to express it. And what rose up, I think, primarily like in fiction you would call it the inciting incident, was that I left a 35-year marriage, and it broke my heart to leave that marriage, and then I was so naive, and I didn't know. I thought that, my marriage was one of the kind of marriages where you're growing. We both did IFS, we both were part of healing communities. We had kind of grown up together. I mean, I've known my ex for like 43 years. And so I thought that like dating would be easy. I know how to communicate. I know how to sit with my triggers. Like I was really kind of arrogant. And then dating was a complete shock. I had no idea. It sounds, I say it this way to be funny. I had no idea what I was doing with complicated women. I didn't know.
I love the honesty and that. Yeah, carry on. So,
Yeah. And then in that year the book covers about a year, 18 months. I left a 35-year marriage. 2 friends died. My landlord sold my building and I had to move. The new people kicked everybody out. I had to find a place to live in the middle of 2 deaths. And then my now ex got in a major car accident and broke their back. And it was kind of like, at the end of the year, it was like, thank God this year is over. Like,
yes.
can anything else happen in a single year? And I also, I dated people who, in response to them, I was very dysregulated, and I had enormous chemistry with some people that in my marriage I hadn't experienced in a long time. So I just felt with the book that I needed to tell the story of this like bizarrely innocent 60 something going on the apps to date.
Yeah.
And then I'm plural. And so when I first wrote the book, I was just writing, okay, what happened to me this year? Like what happened? I don't understand what happened. I've never had these kind of relationships, these dating relationships. And then I went back and I said, well, if I want to understand what happens, then I have to write it from the point of view of all of me.
Yeah.
And also how in IFS, we call them parts. I call them inner people because my plurality means my parts are more separate.
Yeah.
And how do they relate to each other? And how did we as a system choose these people?
Yeah.
Who chose them actually? Was I hijacked? And so answering those questions in the second draft of the book took me to the place. It was a whole new place. It was a place I really wanted to be.
Wow. How
And
was that working with publishers and trying to
I have
communicate?
self-published the book,
Okay.
and I started off saying, "Oh, this is a book I'm gonna need to self-publish." And then I queried publishers, and there were people who were interested, but they said, "Oh, you wrote in all these fonts. That means a book designer. That means it's going to be." And I knew, and I had this experience before of people saying, "This is great. This is new. This is groundbreaking. Let's make it more conventional so that it's easy to produce."
Hmm.
And it is hard to produce. I mean, the book designer and I have had to do a lot of work
Yeah.
with the graphic elements of the book. Like, it's not a comic strip, but it does have illustrations and the fonts are like illustrations. So, um, I am so happy that I self-published this book
Hmm.
because it would have been personally very difficult to make any compromises artistically
Yes.
when it's about my inner family, which is sacred to me. And I
Yeah.
don't want to compromise on what's sacred to me.
For sure. Well, and I tell you too, just in what I have gotten through, it takes a bit for me to figure out what's going on as any book, but once it lands, like it's good, like Orpheus and all,
Yeah.
it really, you did a good job. And so, yeah,
Thank you.
I'm, so you had mentioned IFS, the multiplicity, and I was intrigued because Dick Schwartz, he endorsed the book and just talked about it being a courageous and uncensored window into how IFS members interact and how trauma shapes those parts and relationships. And so I am curious, what was it like to let readers see your inner world so openly? And you've talked about that a little bit. It seems to be, yeah, a lot of discovery and kind of, yeah, the IFS principles and Dick endorsing the book, how all that came about, or just I tend to throw out questions that are big and maybe make a little sense. Whatever makes sense, I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
So I actually, this is the third project of mine that Dick has endorsed.
Okay.
He is an incredibly generous man. And, uh, and I met him probably around 2010. I was at Kripalu with my ex-partner of 35 years and who was a huge Dick fan. And we were there doing a couples workshop something, and they found out that Dick was there. And so they saw him and they were like so geeked out, like, "I'm such a
Mm-hmm.
fan." And Dick was like, "Well, why don't you just come sit in on this opening to the workshop?" And they did and I didn't. And then I guess a year or two later, I did a workshop at Kripalu with Dick. And I think we kind of clicked,
Mm-hmm.
at the workshop. I was newly out of yoga teacher training and I just so wanted to teach everybody yoga, and he was not into yoga. So I got him to do a little restorative yoga. But at that workshop, um, I started to talk to him about polyfragmentation and that IFS works one part at a time. And for me, that I was like, I don't have 1,000 years, like,
Yeah.
And so we had a private conversation about that. And then I was one of his demos, and he worked with me. And and it was really moving and really fun.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did a couples, my ex and I did a couples thing with him. And and my first project coming out as Plural was in 2017. I did a one-person show. I always call it a supposedly solo show, which was called Many Trump Refugees in One Body. And
Yeah.
I actually had
Yeah.
sections, like the show had 4 different kind of braided performance modalities that, interspersed with each other. And one of them, I openly played a selection of my inner people.
Mm.
So I've been in 3D in front of audiences uh, doing that. And oh my God, it was so terrifying.
Yeah.
But I got to San Francisco. And then I changed the name of the show to my preferred pronoun is we,
Mhm.
and other plural people knew that it had to be a plural person doing the show.
Yeah.
So I had a bunch of plural people come to the show. It was on the IFS listserv. Dick
Okay.
had endorsed it, so people came. And I got standing ovations every night. It
Wow.
was, when you think of the stigma, right? And Dick has done so much to reduce the stigma and to normalize parts, which normalizes multiplicity for people who have,
Yeah.
greater trauma histories and more separation like I do. Um, that's what makes it terrifying is the shame that comes with stigma.
Yeah.
And and it was amazing to me that I would perform and people would wait to talk to me when I got off stage. And my first conversation with them, they knew I was plural
Yeah.
and they had seen me switch and they understood how I worked my system. And it was such a relief. Like
Yeah.
instead of the when am I going to disclose this, you
Yeah.
know? So yeah, I think that's the start of that. And then I made a web series and I wrote a plural character and played it. And this is the third project. This one has a much wider reach, right? I, if you think, okay, I'm in San Francisco, I'm performing for an audience of 100, 150 people, and I put it up on TikTok and I get 1,000 views in a day.
Right.
It's
Yes.
and there's no erasing what's on the internet, so I'm out for good, you
That's
know?
right. Yeah. I get that. Yeah. And that why I'm curious I spent 20 years in San Francisco. And so I grew up in South Carolina. That's where I met my wife. We got married, had kids, and now we've moved back to Wisconsin where she's from. But where'd you perform in San Francisco, if you don't mind me asking?
Uh, it's in the Tenderloin.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm just the name of the theater will come back to me.
Okay, that's fine. Not I was curious there. And so you had mentioned the idea of your part instead of parts, people,
Inner
and how
people.
your parts have more separation, and talking about that with Dick of how you don't have the time to one-on-one kind of thing, however you said that. I'd be curious to know, yeah, how is that? Can you talk a little more about being plural and how that's a little, or maybe, I don't know, that's a bad question, but I'll say it anyway. Would all plural people see that more separation? And how is that for you? Yeah.
So, I have known other plural people over the course of my life, right? Because I have been healing for, I don't know, since I was 27 and I'm 65. So I've been at it a long time and I've met people. Some plural people, they lose time. So, you hear stories of somebody that they kind of wake up and the personality that was there 5 years ago comes back for the first time 5 years later, and their kid is 11 and they were 6 the last time they remember,
Yeah.
which is traumatic and it's a rupture and it's difficult. And I think those plural people have even more separation than I do.
Okay.
And the walls between the personalities are thicker. And, and they want continuous memory. And, so for those people, integration is still on the table,
Yeah.
right? Like if you think of IFS, what it normalizes it for the rest of our lives, we will have parts and we will have parts hijack us and have parts who need attention and have parts who need self energy. Um, but for, I think, the people who are plural, kind of like Sybil, that's the most famous, they think, oh, I want to integrate.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't I didn't lose time as an adult. There's a line in my solo show, like, where I'm doing this FAQ, "Have you ever woken up in Texas and not known how you got there?" And, the answer one of my teenagers is like, "There's not a single one of us who would pick Texas," you
Yes,
know?
for sure. Yeah.
But I'm not that doesn't happen to me, so I don't have that particular kind of trauma, but I can get hijacked, and when I get hijacked, it's a very I don't know how it is. I mean, I've never been a single personality person, but when I get hijacked, I am watching someone else make decisions and say things,
Mhm.
and I am a clear, conscious presence that cannot stop it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yes, so they go for it. They're doing the firefight, like the firefighters being the firefighter, or the
Right.
manager's being the manager. You're observing, but that's who they are, kind of thing. Yeah.
I think it's, I mean, in the book, and this was, um, in the book, I describe different personalities saying, "I want to date, and here's what I want from dating," and other personalities saying, "We're not ready. It's not
Yep.
time. I'm scared," and that personality being like, "It's gonna happen," you know?
Yeah.
And, and I think when human needs get deeply out of balance, hijacking happens, right? So
Hmm.
you can say like firefighter, protector, um, but when I think about why I got hijacked so much in dating, I was married to someone who was asexual, and
Yeah.
that was why I left. And I had a lot of years of deprivation, and I think of it, my system, my organism was so out of balance because of how much deprivation there was.
Yeah.
And so depending on the role or the job of the different, inner person, they're really trying to bring balance, you
Hmm.
know? And one of the ways I think about that is because my system is so benevolent now, you know? Like when we're not healed, we
Hmm.
have parts of ourselves that want to hurt us or that are not,
Yeah.
they're not congruent with the present day, but my system is very benevolent. Everybody cares about each other.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times if a hijack happens, there's been somebody calling for help and support for a while and getting
Hmm.
ignored. And
Yeah.
that's why the hijacking happens.
Yeah.
And then there has to be a whole process, just like in an outer relationship, a process of repair and rebuild of trust. I'm sorry, I wasn't listening to you,
Yeah.
you know?
That makes sense. And I'm curious, and I'm not saying I keep saying I'm curious. I'm not trying to push IFS here. It's just
Yeah.
naturally coming out because I am. Um, and this may be coming from some of we had talked about some of my how I'm progressive and I like to think I've got it, but I've definitely still got blind spots. And the idea of plural people is kind of newer to me. And so, to others that may be newer, or maybe it's just me, could you talk more about that? Is there a large community? And there are no ignorant questions, I know, but there's a part that thinks you're being ignorant here. But does that make sense? What I'm even trying to ask, the idea of plural people. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Dick would say, "Oh yeah, I started a movement," but in fact, you know, think that he set the stage for a movement to happen in the last maybe 5 years, so it is new, it's new to everybody, and it's still I mean, it's barely cresting the mainstream, and it's cresting the mainstream in social media. Um, there's a website called Power to the Plurals, started
Mhm.
in Scotland. There have been some, like, kind of retreats and conventions, and there are people who claim plural identity like I do, I became plural as a way to cope with suffering, with trauma. But there are people who, don't have trauma histories who are claiming plural identity, and, it's very associated with the queer community, and, like, there's a queer comic who says, like, LGBTQIA plus 2 spirit. None of us even know. We're taking over the alphabet, you know? And, we just are inclusive. So it's natural in the queer community to take something like, multiple personalities or DID and say, this isn't my diagnosis.
Mhm.
This is my identity. Homosexuality was once a diagnosis. It was very pejorative. So we reclaim things. Neurodiverse is an identity, right? So it is really new. And I'm like, I didn't even hear about it. I'm plural.
Yeah.
Like I was a little late to the party for a person who is plural.
Okay.
And I think it's really hopeful because what I mean, what plurality has taught me, what being plural and working with my system has taught me is not only all parts are welcome, all parts get a voice, all voices are heard equally.
Mhm.
There is no hierarchy. This is a constellation of caring, and it's spiritual, and it embodies feminist principles. It embodies queer theory. IFS, the big S self, is from Hinduism.
Mhm.
Unburdening to the four elements is paganism. It's drawing together all these kind of earth-centered, almost indigenous practices that are the opposite of what we're seeing in the world today, which is hierarchy gone mad, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And imagine if I say my system is benevolent, right? Imagine a world in which if someone acts out, you say, oh, you were asking for help, and that's my part. I didn't listen to you,
Yeah.
right? A
Yeah.
world in which there's no hierarchy, we're all equal, all our voices are important. I have a thing about inclusivity. Like, yes, Black trans women are the most oppressed group, but we do not cure what's wrong with our society by reversing the hierarchy. We cure what's wrong with our society by erasing the hierarchy
Yes.
and giving everybody. We don't say, okay, now, Black trans women are going to be privileged and white men don't have a place at the table.
Yeah.
That's just hierarchy and patriarchy in a different
Mm.
form.
Mhm.
So, um, I'm very passionate about this. It's kind of like
Yeah. Well, I
life
love it.
mission.
And there are parts, and I told you before we hit record that I'm nervous and I actually prepped, and I want to read. I've got a script and I tend to get away from it. And then I'm like, dang, I should have asked that. So I'm actually going to ask all my questions at some point. If that's, and there's not a
Okay.
ton,
Yeah.
but I have parts that say stay in the conversation and then both. And so we can do both here. But I had told you, yeah, just kind of the idea of how as a white cisgender male, and I have to be honest, it's probably been 7 years now, but I didn't know what cisgender was until seven years or so ago. And that the idea, yeah, when I come into an interview like this, yeah, I really want to get it right. And I joke, and maybe I won't edit this out probably, but there's a part of me. I told my therapist yesterday, because we were talking about this interview, and I'm like, I want to get it right, and I'm probably gonna screw up my little Tim coming up. And the idea, and now I keep talking and then I forget what I was coming to. That's my ADHD. My Adderall did kick in just before you hopped on. But the idea, there's a part of me that when I do this podcast or when I'm in an IFS training, first of all, the idea of plurality, and we're all plural, not that, I mean, I think I'm he him. That's what it is, and I don't need to push they them because there's a sense plurality. We could all be they them, but yeah, that's not for me to claim all that, and I want to be an ally. But my point is, with often in things like this, there's a part of me that wants to be seen as a trans woman. Kind of
Mhm.
maybe is what's getting to what you see, that I'm still who I am. I'm still blind. I still miss it, and I'm not the one that needs to be at the top of society anymore. But I still matter. I'm still different and diverse. And it's not vanilla. I guess. Does that make any sense? I'm going all over the place now. So,
No, it makes sense to me. There is a non-binary influencer whose name is Alok, and they are South Asian. And they say, and I believe they're 100% right. They say the gender binary oppresses everyone. It
mm,
locks people into roles that are singular and that require you to disown parts of who you are in
mm,
order to be accepted and to feel like you belong.
mhm,
So if you go
mm,
with that theory, then everybody is a they them. And the exploration of our parts is kind of infinite in its possibility. And and why would you need to leave anybody behind? It doesn't
Mm.
make any sense, you know? I mean, you know, you could say, and Dick says there are no bad parts, right? But there are people who create a lot of damage, and then you don't wanna leave them behind, but you might not want them to be out in society, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. Yeah, I know. All parts are welcome, all behaviors are not. And the parts of me that doubt that all parts are welcome, when they hear that, they're like, see, they're not all welcome. And I get it, it's nuanced, but yes, you're right on there for sure. Um, so you had mentioned the sacredness about your inner world and your people. What makes it sacred, or can you speak more to the sacredness?
Um, I'm pausing because it's so sacred, it's hard to talk
Mm.
about.
And you don't, you know that there's
Well,
room
yeah,
here for, yeah,
yeah, so I'm trying to think of a way that, to phrase it.
yeah, yeah. Take your time.
I think healing and vulnerability and trust are all sacred to me in any form.
Mhm.
And there is because I can hear my inner people so clearly, because they're so real to me, um, those things, healing and vulnerability and trust, happen on a much more conscious plane.
Mhm.
At least more than my other kind of case is my ex, you know, and they weren't as conscious of their parts, and they struggled in IFS to hear their parts.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, I'm gonna use an analogy, like, think of a child, right? I'm gonna use an example from current politics because it's so
Please.
disturbing to me, but
Yes.
think of a child who's been held in an ICE facility and has been denied food and sanitation and separated from their parents, and they're let out of that facility, and they're not okay, and you are the person that is their human, right? You're gonna be their first contact. It's a very sacred thing when that child says, "People are bad, but I'm gonna trust you anyway,"
Mhm. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's and it's, uh,
Mm.
like, I'm their human. They don't get
Yeah.
another human. I'm the only one they get.
Yeah.
So I have to be like the first point of contact coming out of this very dark place, and I have to exude the kind of safety that allows for vulnerability, trust, and healing.
Yeah.
What is not sacred about that? Like, I
Right.
can't even imagine anything more sacred than that, you know? And self energy is divine light, right? And so if you're going to create a place and try to heal all the parts of yourself, you have to amplify that in yourself as much as you can. And
Yeah.
that's also a spiritual journey, you know?
Yeah. Well, I love that. I mean, I get kind of goosebumps. I'm their human. Yeah. That's powerful. And it is, yeah, sacred mystery, whatever that is. It's hard to make sense of it, but yeah, it's special. It's something different there. So I appreciate your courage in going there and sharing that for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, let's see. I'll go to a couple softball questions here, maybe, and then we'll see where that goes. But so, when did you first realize that your inner world had these distinct voices?
It was kind of a process. So when I was quite young, I read Sybil, and, um, and I can never quite, like, was I 16 or was I 21?
Okay.
But it was at one of those ages. I read Sybil, and I was sitting on my bed when I finished it, and I was like, "Oh, that's what's going on with me, I'm multiple like Sybil."
Mhm.
And then I was like, "I don't lose time." But I got up and I went to my closet, and there were, like, little tiny wardrobes that you would never think would belong all to the same person,
Mm.
right? And so I was like, "Huh." And then I dismissed it, right? I don't lose time, I don't have her symptoms, it can't be plural. And then, I had a therapist who gave me When Rabbit Howls by Trudy Chase,
Mm.
and, I read it, and I actually think she should never have given me that book. Like, what a way to try to tell a client they might be plural, right? To give them a book that details some of the most violent abuse, like, it was just but I
Mm.
read the book, and I'm a fast reader, I read it in, like, 2 days. I came back into therapy the next week, and I threw it on the carpet,
Mm.
and I said, "If you think I'm multiple, why don't you just say so?"
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I had never switched in front of her, like, I had no symptoms. She was making an educated guess based on the history, right?
Yeah.
That it was likely. And, and I guess, and then if we wanna talk about, like, courage, it's one of the bravest things I've ever done. I went to the police and reported my father.
Mm.
And afterwards, like 2 weeks afterwards, I heard it's like this rumbling, and the words appeared in my mind, "If you're strong enough to go to the police, you're strong enough for us." And I was like,
Mm.
"What? What's that?"
Mm.
You know? And,
Yeah.
"Uh-oh," 'cause I'd been doing healing work for a while, and I was curious though, so I started writing in my journal,
Mm.
like, "Hello? Is anybody in
Mhm.
there?" And
Yeah.
suddenly I'm writing with my left hand, and suddenly there are all these different handwritings,
Wow.
and they all picked their own colors, and I was like, "Is this real? What's going on? I don't" you know? And then
Yeah.
I was like, "Alright." And then I also, I m oh, my ex was so great with my inner kids. So this is all happening, and and we went to Provincetown for vacation, and my ex and I had 2 best friends, like, people I was so close to, and they were all so excited. It
Yeah.
was like a party. "Who's coming to the party now?"
Yeah.
And we were on the beach in Provincetown, and we were walking, and I kept saying and I'd been saying for a week, "I just feel like I'm 3. I don't know why. I feel like 3. I don't know why I feel so 3." And my ex turned to me and said, "Hi, 3." And it was the first time I big switched, and this kid came out, "You can see me!" And, like and,
Yeah.
uh, and that was, if there was any doubt, that ended there. So
Yeah. That's did you where did you live in the US or where you from or however?
well, Portugal is like my 5th or 6th country. So,
Okay.
I was an expat in my 20s, and then I was in the United States, and then I started doing expat stuff again about 8 years ago. Um, I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. I went to high school outside of Philadelphia. I went to college in Arizona. I lived in Spain and Japan, and then I came back and I lived in New England for the rest of my adult life.
Okay, got and now where do you is there a home base now?
I live outside of Lisbon in Portugal.
Okay, so you're there. Okay, got it.
Yeah, and I've been here for 6 months, and I don't know what I'm doing. I mean,
Right.
I actually am enjoying Portugal very much. I'm glad to be here while I'm publishing this book. It feels safer.
Yeah,
And
for
but I
sure.
own property, I have a place in the United States.
Okay, got it.
So,
Uh, So, how is it to live day to day with your inner people when you wake up and yeah,
um, it is, uh it is often joyful, and it is always a call to action, right? So, I can wake up and I'm like, "Oh, somebody's upset about something," and then time to go in, right? Time to
Mhm.
go inside, and I have different ways of doing that, but I think, I mean, there's the inner world and there's the outer world. I'm very I have great social skills, it's just part of how I was raised, but I spend a lot of time alone, and I am in conversation with my inner people pretty much all the time. right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, I'm a fanatic paddleboard, but people that like, do I just stand there paddling one side? No, I have a bunch of kids that are like, "Hi, fish. Hi, birds." And, and teenagers who are like, "I rock." So, and I just let them come out and do that because it's joyful. It's fun to be all of who you are.
Yeah.
And the other part that's really joyful is I do have just a couple people. I used to have more, but I have a couple people in my life who, and one of them is probably my closest friend. She's also an actor and she does solo shows. So she plays tons of characters in her solo show and she's kind of in love with her characters. So I will talk from my personalities and she will answer from her characters.
Mm.
And it is the most raucous comedy you could like. And who gets to be that free?
Yeah.
You know, it's partly thespian, but it's also
Yeah.
partly dropping your boundaries and inhibitions in a safe place. And then it can be really hard, right? So I get triggered and I'm known territory to myself and I know where the trigger is coming from. And I know I have to address it in one of 10 ways. And so there's also a requirement, I think, lifelong requirement to be willing to lean into grief and pain whenever it shows up, because avoiding it is never a good idea.
Yeah, that's right.
And of course,
Yeah.
I do avoid it, and then it bites me, and then I lean in. And I'm not
Yes.
perfect. So,
Yeah, exactly. That. And you had mentioned in the book too, I believe, that your parts, like, they don't want, like, for me to say, can I talk to so and so? I think, didn't you allude to something like that? As they get triggered, if is that
no,
ringing? Yeah.
it does. In the book, I mean, I'm dating. In the book, I get, I have this web series, right? It's on YouTube.
Okay.
And in it, I'm playing a plural character who switches when they're alone. And the plural character is the therapist, right? And they switch when they're alone with their partner. So I'm switching on camera. And anybody can go on YouTube and watch this, right?
Where can they
So
find it? And then I want to hear more. Yeah. How do we
it's
find you?
it. You would go on YouTube and search assigned female at birth, or search Lyralen Kaye,
Okay.
and you would find it. Or Another Country TV. That's the channel.
Okay.
Um, but so I was dating, and I dated a woman whose last partner had been a therapist, and her ex, watched the series and said, "What's it like to go out with a plural person?" And the woman I was dating was like, "What are you talking about?"
Mm.
And then she asked me because I hadn't come out to her, and I said, "Yes." And immediately, if you're dating somebody and you're getting intimate and getting to know each other and there's, attraction, like both the women that I was outed to, when I came out to, immediately, they're like, "When do I get to meet your people?" And in the book, I say what I said to them, which is,
You can be as raw as you need to be here, just so you know. So,
okay, yeah, I was like, "When I'm fucking ready, that's when you
yeah.
can meet them. And that is not now. I don't know you."
Yeah.
Right? I have a boundary about my inner people. And actually, my inner people would like to come out and talk to people more, but I'm very cautious about that.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'm cautious about it. And you can talk about it because it's neurodiversity, right? Am I masking
Hmm.
and pretending to be a single personality person? Or do I have boundaries and self protection? Which one is it, or both?
Right.
Probably both, right?
Yep.
But I learned, and this is much less true now, but 30 years ago, it's 35 years ago now, when I went to a therapist and we started actually working on multiplicity. She was not a good therapist.
Hmm.
And she was always trying to get more and more of my personalities to come out and tell her who they were. But then she would sometimes intervene between my personalities
Hmm.
and empower some and disempower others. And so I had this experience of somebody else being or trying to take over the central agency of my inner system.
Yeah.
And what I
Mhm.
learned is if you can call out a personality of mine by name, then it's much harder for me to say, no, you can't talk to them.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't want to give somebody that power
Yeah.
to know a name or to have that kind of freedom unless I am absolutely sure that they don't have an agenda or something that they want from me that I don't want to give them.
For sure. Makes perfect sense. Yeah.
And in early dating, you don't know that about
Mm-mm.
anybody.
No. Yeah.
So, and the last woman I dated, I mean, she's by far my favorite. I've dated
Mhm.
5 people, 1 trans man, 4 women, and she's Portuguese. And I didn't come out to her as plural, but I
Mhm.
acted plural all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she was very perceptive. She said, "You're plural." But she wasn't thinking multiple. She was like, "Wow, you have a lot of different aspects to you." And she would say, "Sometimes I look at you, I just see a teenager." I say, "Yeah, well, that's probably true."
Mhm.
I didn't that's all I would but I feel like that is what I like to do with the unmasking is
Mhm.
I live it and it's in my being. The language and the power that language gives and the open switching where my voice and everything changes a lot, that's I save that for the people that I really love and trust.
Yeah. Yep. And I'm curious, there I am again. But did writing the memoir, has that changed your relationship with any of the parts or people?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think, I didn't when I wrote the memoir, I didn't realize, what you and you don't know when you sit down to write a book what you're trying to teach yourself. If you did, you wouldn't need to write the book.
Mhm.
So I didn't know when I wrote the book that one of the arcs was going to be the change in the relationships of my inner people to each other.
Mhm.
So I think that had already changed and it changed more by articulating it. And for me, it's the most important and powerful part of the book is, um, is to watch not just self energy, but different parts embody self energy and
Mhm.
offer forgiveness and caring and compassion to each other after they've made big mistakes that all of us have paid for, right? Gotten
Yeah.
involved with the wrong people sometimes. And um, yeah, so I would say absolutely. And it made me love them more.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And it seems that you have, or not just seems, but those characters, do other develop over time? Do you have a pretty good feel of who's here and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I don't uh I mean, I haven't developed a new personality in decades.
Mhm.
Um, but personalities have changed. So I don't I mean, my personality is developed in reaction to trauma, you
Mhm.
know? And and I think one of the things of a system, a constellation of inner people is and this is very Dick, right? That um they take over different roles.
Mhm.
But there's a thing about I have so many protectors and, um, like, I have a protector who is a 5-year-old and she's a she, her, she's the only she, her in the system,
Mm.
but her job was to make people like me.
Mm. Mm.
So, she's fun, she has no shame, she'll say anything, she's utterly charming. I've done plays where I've played a child and I used, she was the one playing the child, and I came out on stage as her, and the whole audience went, "Oh," you know? So, I think one of the things, it's a very IFS thing, the protectors let go of their jobs. They let go of their burden of protection. Some exiles take on the responsibility of healing other exiles.
Hmm.
So I don't develop new personalities, but the ones that are already there, um, they change, and they change in relationship to each other and in relationship to the world.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And I often tell people because I quote, I think Dick, and by the way, I've met Dick a few times, but I don't know Dick. So I don't want to be one of those people that's acting like I do.
No, I don't know well either, but he's helped me a lot.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, just that presence that you talked about is evident for sure. But in his, I think it's the internal family systems, kind of the textbook. Um, he says, on the one hand, we have an infinite number of parts. On the other hand, about 30 show up in the course of therapy. And I found too that they align. Like, it's probably, do you have an idea of how many you have, if it's all right to ask that? Or,
I don't answer that question ever,
yeah.
really. Um,
And I
but
love
and
that. Yeah. And yeah, go ahead.
I in the book I say, you know, there's I do it in my solo show. How many of you are there? And then I do this whole like comedy thing. Well, like the lost count around 200.
Yeah.
Um, so it's this thing about I only answer the question by not answering the question.
Love it.
And I think about it that the reason that I won't answer the question is because, and this is before Dick, there used to be a classification, right? There were personalities and then there were fragments. And
Mhm.
and the idea was that no inner person was ever three-dimensional, but some were more two-dimensional, some were more developed. And then the fragments just carried like part of a memory and they didn't have as many characteristics. And I dispensed with that, kind of going back to what I was saying before.
Mhm.
Everybody has a voice. All voices are equal. Everyone is welcome. And I don't do hierarchy.
Yeah.
So out of that, I don't answer the question.
And that's a great answer to the question, by the way. And I mean, yes, because it is. And it's all like when I hear you say my inner people versus parts, separation, like that's kind of where, and I'm not a therapist, I'm a coach, I'm trained in IFS, but I'm kind of one of those, well, I'll say it for myself, but yeah, many like the weirdo personality I've kind of taken on, and that's not putting myself down, but so I'm not calling you a weirdo, but I meet many, well, maybe I am because I don't want that part to come out and say, just call me a weirdo. But we're beautiful people and it's better to self-publish kind of thing. And so does that make sense? when I,
Yeah, I call myself a unicorn,
yes. Yeah.
and and I have come to a place in my life where I like to be around other unicorns,
Yes, yeah,
you know?
and I'm
So
finding the unicorn, and I didn't design this, and it's not only happening with me, but the unicorns are coming out, and it's a beautiful thing, and so,
it's really beautiful.
yeah, it really is. Um, okay, so anything else about dating? And
Uh, okay, I mean, I could talk about dating, I swear, for a week. Um, I think too that because I mean, one thing is I had no idea how well I had picked with my partner that I was with really for most of my life. I had no idea that I don't think maybe they knew, uh, but, to decide at 27 this was who I was gonna be with, and when we got together, I had had 2 other relationships. I had dated a bunch, but I had had 2 relationships, and I was 27 years old, and I had 1 criterion, and the criterion was I wanted somebody who would work with me.
Mhm.
Now, of course, there were other like moral, decent person, you know what I mean, honest, all that
Yeah,
stuff. but I just wanted somebody who would do the work with me. And because the other two people didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I snuck behind my parents' back and went to therapy when I was 16 years
Mm.
old. So I was like, I was determined to heal. I don't maybe out of the womb, you know? And,
Mm.
and so because, you know, in my late 20s, my 30s, my 40s, my 50s, I was with one person. And then I started dating at 62. And I didn't date anybody who had my life experience.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it's like to date at 30 or 40, right?
Yeah.
And I think the thing about dating people who are in their late 50s and 60s that I found was that the patterns of living were pretty deeply ingrained. Most people talked about doing their work, but therapy has changed dramatically since the 90s and early 2000s. And that was when they did their work.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very neck up.
Yeah.
So they haven't done as much work as they think they've done.
Yeah.
And to like, you know, when you date somebody, I call it, you know, you become deep witness to their life.
Yeah.
And I was shocked that I couldn't talk to them.
Yeah.
And I don't mean like sometimes I silenced myself just out of I was so appalled. I was afraid I'd say something really horrible and judgmental, and I didn't wanna say it. But I couldn't talk to them because they didn't listen and respond.
Yeah.
And I was like I met so many women in particular because, you know, uh, it was hard to find other non-binary and trans people, you know, that were appropriate for me to date,
Mm-hmm.
who were like, "I just wanna find my person. I haven't had that love affair. I've never been in love, or the only you know, chemistry I had was really toxic and, uh, and then, it's a polarization, right? So they're
Mm-hmm.
saying that. And then they're saying, "And when I date, the person can't come first. I can't give myself away. My family comes first, then my job, then I travel, and then, you know." And I was like, "No one healthy is going to go for that.
Mm-mm.
That's a hierarchy and a way to not
Yes.
match." So so you want your person, but you're not really open to your person. And there's reasons you're not open because you've been hurt a lot.
Yeah.
But until that polarization gets resolved, the door doesn't open.
Mm-hmm.
And I found it heartbreaking
Yeah.
and also heartbreaking for them and heartbreaking for me. Like, oh my God, where's a unicorn? I need a unicorn, you
Yes.
know?
For
And
sure.
I am definitely the unicorn, 35 years married to somebody that I am best friends with now because there was so much love to start off with, you
Okay.
know?
Because I was going to ask that. And Toby, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
Toby.
and you just said best friends.
Yeah, we are really close friends, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That is so cool.
I mean, we weren't there. By the end of the book, we weren't there. I mean, you could tell there was love and you know, but we weren't it's a big shift to go
Mm-hmm.
from being partners to being friends, and we hadn't made the shift by the end of the book, but I think we've made it now, you know,
Yeah.
and they because we were able to make it, we get to be family for the rest of our lives, and
Yeah.
I would not ever want that to be any other way.
Yeah.
So,
Wow. It's beautiful. Yeah. When I was thinking too, uh, yeah, and then sometimes you meet the unicorns and then maybe another unicorn, or I don't know if you ever feel that or I love the unicorns, but it's complex and it can be, it's a beautiful mess, beautiful mystery. So
yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
I don't know
Beautiful
what I
mess.
mean by that, but I wanted to say it. And so, all right, let's see here. I'm going to go back because I've got we're almost done,
Okay.
but, yeah, well, wanted to mention, so we talked a little bit again before we hit record, and I was talking about some of my insecurities. I've got it. By the way, when you said you're she, her, was a people pleaser or trying to make you look good. It's probably, I may have more they thems, but my they them would be a similar comparison to that, I think. But you had mentioned, and even the idea if someone calls you the wrong pronoun, that we haven't had a lot of pronouns in this conversation, which is interesting. But you had said, I correct that when that happens. And so how do you correct? Or maybe yeah, if someone
Um,
calls you the wrong pronoun.
yeah, I just want to say for my 5-year-old who is like, I'm not a people pleaser. I should be
I love it.
world.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, she is just, she makes people like her by being herself. It's very weird. Do you know what I mean? She's
I
not.
do. Yeah, and people, and I love that because I do notice when you say, "Oh, I don't answer that question," we're just being real here, or "Oh, my 5-year-old," I notice my 5-year-old start tightening, and I want listeners to know that's an example of speaking for your parts, and yes, I said people pleaser, but you said more make me look good, I think, or
Make people like me. Yeah.
yes, make people like me. Yes, for sure. It makes perfect sense. And yeah, anything more there or that she
Yeah,
needs? Or?
no, it's just, I think that there's such a thing in my system about, in PTSD, we now have all the Fs. I am going to answer your question, but we
That's
have
fine.
like,
Yeah.
fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Isn't there another F? But, fawn is very uncomfortable for many, many of my parts. And the good thing about that is they refuse to try to read other people and give them what they want.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's a shame thing, right? I
Yeah.
make people like me by being star of the show.
Yes.
That's so cute.
Yes.
Um, so remind me of your question again, just
It
so I
was
can.
just how you correct people when they do the wrong
Uh,
pronoun. Yeah.
yeah. So I I ran in the web series. I ran a film set, and I ran it with consent culture, and there was the entire crew was queer, and the cast was mostly queer, but there were different generations, and there were some straight women who were in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they had never used they them, and they were terrible at it. They were
Mm-hmm.
so bad at it. And we created a policy, and I think it's a really good policy for pronoun correction. If somebody said to me, yeah, Sky, when she was at Sarah Lawrence, and I would say, uh, excuse me, pronoun correction, when they were at Sarah Lawrence, then the person should say, oh, sorry, when they were at Sarah Lawrence, and
Mm-hmm.
then you move on.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens, and it happens a lot generationally, queer or straight, it doesn't matter. Because like middle-aged lesbians are no better at pronouns than middle-aged straight people.
Yeah.
And is people will apologize, and you end up taking care of their feelings for them having misgendered you, which no matter how well or how skillfully we handle it, it hurts. It
Yeah.
hurts to be misgendered.
Yeah.
And it's always, I it's always how is this person really seeing me? If they're misgendering me, are they really saying, I don't see you as a non-binary person? Is
Yeah.
that what they say when they misgender me? And a lot of people would say it's comfort, it's language, it's getting used to it. And up to a point, that's true. Um, and and I think you have to practice, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I said I dated this Portuguese woman. English was her fourth language,
Mm-hmm.
fourth, and she mastered the pronouns faster than anybody else I.
Mm, yeah.
And the reason why is she did not see me as a woman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that makes it, yeah, I get that. And I can't remember if it was before, if we talked about it here, but the idea that plural, again, I'm not trying to make we're all plural as a sexuality thing, because that's different and there's more stuff there. But there is something about when I was reading of your book of that plural, it makes it easier. And it even makes it easier to see you now, knowing some of your story. And I don't know, this conversation really hasn't had a place for practice of pronouns too much, which may be a universe thing for my sake. But but it changes. Yeah, there's something about seeing you for who you are makes a difference.
Yeah.
What little I know. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the Gen Z people in my life, Gen Z and millennials, but mostly Gen Z, they call me you all.
Mm.
And I had, when I did go to grad school at Sarah Lawrence, and I didn't come out till as plural till the very end. And I mostly was friends with my professors, not with the other students. And I was in the office. I came in and I said, "Can I shut the door?" And this guy, Dave, and I loved him. And I would go into his office and talk, and we'd just laugh. And he's gay. And I said, "I've been here for 2 years and nobody knows me." And I started to cry.
Mm.
And he said, "What do you want me to know about you that I don't
Mm.
know?" And I said, "I'm multiple."
Mm.
And he just took this very short breath and he said, "Well, hi, how are you all doing?"
Mm.
And it was the best, like, response, that immediate shift to plurality.
It's you.
He did it instinctively, and this was in 2002. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. It's you, and just do it. Yeah. And the worst thing, I don't know if it's the worst thing, but it probably is, but going into a shame spiral, making it about me.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
And
I
you're not
mean,
go ahead.
no, I mean, I think I in my marriage, we are both very committed to anti-racism,
Mhm.
and we lived in it was a, like, working middle class African American neighborhood. We lived in Roxbury, Massachusetts. We owned a condo there. And there were hardly any white people. And I was raised in a very racist family, and my ex was raised in Pittsburgh and always knew a very diverse community, went to school with African American, Latinos, Latinx people. And so we would come home, and I would say, "So this happened today." And I had this thought, "Is that a racist thought?"
Mhm.
And so we had created this container with each other. We're both white. We are raised in a racist country. We have racist thoughts. As anti-racists, we are trying to get conscious and get better.
Yeah.
And the only way to get better is to have somewhere that's safe and non-harmful for the other person to hear what
Yeah.
you're struggling with, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody has those thoughts.
Mhm.
I think it talks about this
Mhm.
with there are no bad parts. And, when I have when I have a kid who, like, says something and they haven't updated from, like, 1965 Cleveland, Ohio,
Right.
I'm like, yeah, no, that's not, I gotta teach them, you know?
Yeah.
And I can't shame them and expect them to learn. I have to just teach them with
Right.
kindness.
Yeah, I believe in his book in No Bad Parts, working with a challenging protector, and he uses racism as the basis, and same thing that you're saying, and that, yeah, for sure. It's there, and we just need to see them. And and yeah, they don't go on running the show or leading my patriarchal parts, don't lead my life, but
Right.
they tend to to say that I don't have any patriarchal parts, that I'm at the top, uh, hopefully coming down. Those are other
Yeah.
parts, because
I've
these parts aren't going to say that, but they're there. And We can name them. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I think about with, this thing about hierarchy and reversing the ladder, of course, that is what people on the top are afraid of, right? Now I'm gonna be
Hmm.
on the bottom. Um, but I think that it's survival. Privilege feels like survival.
Hmm.
It's not just a couple steps ahead in something that doesn't matter. It's steps ahead in survival, in
Yeah.
having a better life. And I mean, there are billionaires who give away their fortunes, right? They keep plenty,
Yes,
you
for
know?
sure.
Yeah, nobody wants to give from what you feel like you need to survive.
Yeah. Yes, for sure.
And so we have to, we live in competition, capitalism. We have to cultivate a felt sense of having enough for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. Love that. Yeah. Parts of me love that. Parts of me hate it, but I love the way you put that is beautiful, is what I'm saying there. All right. I keep saying I'm almost done because I'm loving this. So I've got one more thing that came to mind. You had mentioned the idea of the middle, my words, not yours, but in your book, the idea you had just mentioned like middle aged lesbians struggling with pronouns too. The idea, let me see if I can phrase this right, but the middle age or the older gay folks that Harvey Milk, the 60s and all that, and the newer folks kind of not, I'm not phrasing this right, but hopefully it'll ring a bell, but not seeing eye to eye or their differences there. Is that making any sense or do I need to keep talking?
Yeah, no, I mean, I write about it. I don't know if you're at the point in the book where I actually go to Women's Week in
Oh,
Provincetown.
no.
Yeah, and this whole conflict between the younger and older generations, and yeah, I mean, I can tell you it's a little bit of a spoiler, but I don't have a good experience at Women's Week,
Okay.
and
Well, I tell you, should we, it's up to you on the spoiler or not. And
I
I'm
mean,
going to read the book,
not
but yeah.
yeah, it's not a really important spoiler. I'm on a date, and I go with a woman to a comedy show, and the comedian, is talking about younger queer people and how easy they have it, and she's like, "I'm glad they have it so easy, but they have it so easy. There's somebody looks like they're 13 on television complaining they can't take their girlfriend to Pride and talking about how hard it is to be non-binary." And then the comic said, "Face it, you're a girl." And I was like, and that is transphobia
Hmm.
spoken from a stage in like gay Mecca.
Hmm.
And I mean, of course I left the club. But
Yeah.
I think that there's been some really interesting Tales of the City. Do you know Tales of the City by any chance?
I don't, but tell me
It's
why. You're much more red than I am. And I,
yeah, I've read a lot.
yeah,
Armistead Maupin, I'm not sure if I'm saying his name.
my wife is much more red. She would probably know all this. So,
Well, there were two miniseries made from his books. He's a San Francisco gay man. And in the second series, there's an older gay man who is dating a younger gay man of color. And he brings his boyfriend to a dinner where it's all older white gay men. And the older white gay men start kind of attacking this young guy because he had never lived through the AIDS epidemic.
mhm.
And I mean, I did live through it. And of course, it was a trauma. People went to 50 funerals. Everybody, like almost all the gay men I knew died. And, uh, and they were saying like, we've had it so hard and you don't know what that's like. And they're talking to a person of color. They're
Mhm.
talking to a black guy
Mhm.
and saying their lives are harder. Right. So, I think that there's like a number of things, but the younger generation, Gen Z, um, has called into question butch femme. Now it's butch is like you could say it's trans mask.
Mm.
Butch people, there are people who, if you want to identify as butch, that's your agency. But butch and non-binary look a whole lot alike. right?
Mhm.
And then there's also femme non-binary, so that's confusing to people who have identified on the butch femme
Ah,
binary in the queer community,
yeah,
right? And it's asking people to rethink the fundamental constructs of gender that they grew up with as an oppressed people and that they fought for, right?
yeah, yeah.
And they don't want to, and they complain that they them is hard, and they all this, I mean, the typical complaint about they them is they're plural pronouns for a singular person. Anytime you don't know the gender of someone, you use they them. It's
Mhm.
always been both singular and plural. It's
Ah,
not
yes.
not as often, but it's always been there. And but the older gays and lesbians sometimes complain about that, and they know that they have to be respectful, but they go reluctantly. And I mean, I recently had somebody say, "I'm never gonna learn them," to me, and I was
Mm.
like, "And then you don't get to be in my life."
Mhm. Yeah. Yes.
You know?
Yeah,
If you're never going to respect my gender, then you don't get
sure.
to be in my life.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's that, and I think there's also just kind of an unwillingness to change that can come with growing older.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've lived in 5 countries. I was like, I'm never gonna be like that. And I'm not, but I do understand it a little bit because, I moved to Portugal by myself. I speak Spanish, so I did understand some Portuguese. But I have a phone and all my bills are in Portuguese and all my
Mhm.
emails and texts are in Portuguese. And so everything I'm doing here is new in a different language. And I understand wanting things to be easier because I kind of wish it was easier. So I
Yeah.
do understand why
Right.
when you get older, you don't have as much energy. Can things just be easy? Do I really have to do some more work? I don't want to. Um, you should still do the work.
Yeah.
But it,
Yeah.
love and respect, you should do the work. But
Right. No, that's a good word for sure. That's um all right. I'm really curious. So I don't want to stop asking
well,
questions,
you're
but
not you're not hurting me. I've enjoyed this.
I'm
These are things we love to
just
talk about.
yeah.
So.
What what is the pronoun that you said no one knows about that you use? And I saw it. But tell me, yeah.
Oh, this is so my favorite subject. Um, so I would say it's my true pronoun and identity is Fair, Faefaer. It falls under the classification of neopronouns, which I don't really love. I don't love neopronouns. It's like, oh, there's real pronouns and neopronouns. And there's others. There's Z-ear, E-ear, there's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
But so I am Irish American. I'm Irish and German American, but Irish American. And the Fae people come from Celtic mythology, right?
Yeah.
And when we talk about being a unicorn, you can also say, I feel like a changeling, which is
Mhm.
right out of Fae folklore. Um, but the thing about being Fae is it's also a spirituality. It's associated with Celtic spirituality. And the key characteristic of being Fae is that you're in touch with the liminal and you have a deep sense of mystery and the unseen all around us. And if gender, I sometimes say gender is the color of your soul. Um, so gender in the Fae world would have to be fluid, right? The pictures of the Fae that aren't Tinkerbell, but the old mythological Fae, they're all androgynous.
Mm. Yeah.
So I identify so much with the one foot in the liminal. How could I not have one foot in the liminal? I have inner people that nobody can hear but me, you know?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
have imagination and creativity that comes from all of us. That's essence. I mean, I
Mhm.
think I think that you always have to approach anything kind of from multi angles, multi-dimensional, but you also need to directly try to aim for essence, try to aim for the biggest self, right?
Yeah.
And it was where I kind of started my question for Dick. I have polyfragmentation. I can't do one at a time. I don't have 1,000 years, right? It would take too long. So how do you address healing if the parts, he had an idea and we did it and it worked. But I also think you have to address the system as a whole. You have to think about wholeness. And for me, wholeness comes out of being Faye.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for it. That's very helpful. And FAE, what do you put at the end? Or when you put your not at the end, but when you put the pronoun, what is the abbreviation?
FAE, it's just
FAE.
like
Faye.
Skylar, Lyralen, Kaye, Faye, Fair. And Faye, Fair as, she would be Faye, Fair is the same as her.
Okay,
Those
got
are
it.
the
Got it.
part
Yeah.
of the those are
Yeah.
interchangeable.
And what are the names on your book? I mean, they're your names, but is there
Skylar,
any? Yeah.
um, well, yeah, they are names of my inner people,
Okay.
and they're the most interesting thing about Skylar, Lyral, and Kaye. I've been Lyral and Kaye for 25 years or something. I legally changed my name,
Okay.
and I went by Lyralen for a really long time. And if you Google Lyralen, you get like pages of me, and then you get some drug named Lyralen.
Okay.
There was a point where there were 3 Lyralens in the world. Somehow the other 2, I don't know where they went. But when I started dating and I used the name Lyralen, people Googled me. And
Mhm.
I'm in the entertainment industry, and you can
Mhm.
watch me perform and you can watch interviews with me. And if you wanted to, before we even get to our first date, you could know, like, not my whole life history, but you can know a whole
A
lot
lot.
more about me than is healthy for somebody to know. And I think I had been dating like a week or 2 and somebody stalked me. They went on all my social media pages,
Mhm.
they liked everything, they left comments everywhere, and I was like, "Oh, no,
Yeah.
this can't happen." So I started using a different name, and when I used, like, Rhiannon from Fleetwood Mac. I was like, "Oh, what names are cool? I'll use these different names." And then, um and then I started using Sky, and I
Okay.
was like, "Oh, I really like this name." So, Sky came out of dating.
Wow. And then Dick
It's
said
it's
K.
pardon me?
And then Dick said K, or he called you K. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I actually went back and forth with him on that because
Okay.
he had used, I don't know if he used pronouns or whatever, and I said, "Why don't we just use my last name? Would that be alright with you?"
Okay.
Because
Got
that's a
it.
kind of convention of when people do reviews, they will refer you just by your last name, you
Okay.
know?
Yeah.
So,
Uh, Thanks for indulging me on that, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's helpful. All right, 2 more questions, I promise.
Oh,
And if it seems like I'm going conversation mode and then back, it's because I look at these questions that I came up with and I'm like, they don't fit now so much. And it's not a huge one, I don't think. Well, maybe it is, but you'll tell me, whatever. But that's why it keeps going back to the script. But what helps you feel respected or understood when people are still learning? And that may be a question that you don't want to answer. That's fine.
about, gender or about plurality or both?
Both.
Okay. Um, I really appreciate honest effort around pronouns. So when people correct themselves, when they catch themselves and
Hmm.
they say, "Oh, sorry, I got it." I can see it. I've had people be like, they, I
Yeah.
got it." That is really, I think it's adorable and it's also really moving and respectful.
Mhm.
Um, I, and I also feel about gender that I did this thing on TikTok because I've been prepping for the book. I've been doing a lot of TikToks, partly to desensitize myself to
Mhm.
being interviewed. And But I did a thing about, what the questions people didn't ask me about gender in dating. And what I realized is people didn't ask me anything. So when people say, when did you realize you were non-binary? And when did you come out as non-binary? Um, is there anything you want me to know about your gender and how I can see you and respond to you congruently? Those questions are heaven. I never get those questions. They're heaven.
Yeah.
Um, and plurality, I love the you all. I love when people like that, when people uh, refer to me, because you don't use pronouns in one-on-one interactions very much. They don't come up, right? But if you use the plural you, then it can come up. And, my closest friend, every time she calls, she's like, hi, friends. And then she'll say every name of every personality she knows. How are you doing? And then she it's just a way of recognizing that I am me. I'm all of me. And with people who are new, I think, I like questions like, what's it like to be plural? You asked really good questions. What's it like on a day-to-day basis? And that's very different than, can I meet your personalities? How will I know who's out? I had a friend, I came out to her. She said, who have I been talking to? And I'm like, all of us. The whole time you've known me, all of us. I'm not different, So I think there are the questions that are almost prurient, and then there are the questions that are kind of open-ended. Who are you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that give a lot of space for how much vulnerability and intimacy you want to give in response, rather than being probed,
For sure. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and you have definitively not fallen into the probe category. Your questions have all been open-ended and
Yeah.
given me a lot of agency in how I wanted to answer.
Well, thanks, Sky. Thank y'all. Or you all. Y'all may give it too much of a southern, and there's a lot of stuff that come with that. Thank you all. Yeah. For showing up and for your courage. And yeah. Last question. What do you want people to take from the book?
Um, I write about love and redemption. That's what I write about. And I want them to understand how human plurality is, and I also want them to feel empowered in the journey of loving themselves more.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much thank you all. There I go. Now I'm getting into my corrective points. I'm going to move on, but thank you all for being here. And I look forward to staying connected. And when it makes sense, or however, people kind of say that and we never see each other again. But this has been good. And so April 1st, Bachelor X comes out. Comes out. There you go.
You can pre-order. I think you can pre-order the ebook on Amazon. I don't know why they're not letting you pre-order.
Okay. Yep. I did see that with that, but yeah, get the book and pre-order. And I want to keep pushing this too. And we can talk about ways to get it out even more, but grateful for this time. So you said people can find you on YouTube. I mean, maybe you don't want people to find you. Have we said enough about finding you, or is there any more information you want to put out?
I have a website, and definitely YouTube is there for everybody. It's I'm really proud of that series. It's won a ton of awards, and it's really about diversity. It's it's about honoring everybody. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Sky.
You're welcome. It was really, really enjoyable and good to have this conversation.
Yeah. That wraps up another episode of IFS Meditations and Insights. If If today's episode was meaningful to you, please follow, subscribe, and share with someone who might need it. A positive review helps more people find this healing work. And don't forget, you can get your free IFS meditations at exploreifs.com. And until our next session, be gentle with yourself. I'll try to do the same because we're beloved human beings.